Tonight, we begin to ancient Egypt, a land of golden towering pyramids and gods who watched everything. A civilization that looks beautiful from a distance, but up close, it was strict, unforgiving, and strangely brilliant. So before we begin, take a moment to settle in. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Lower the lights. Let the room grow quiet. And imagine waking up somewhere you don't belong. You open your eyes. The air is already warm. Too warm. There's no fan, no breeze, just heat pressing gently against your skin like a constant reminder that this place does not care about your comfort. You sit up slowly, and then you remember, you're not home. You're in ancient Egypt. And not just anywhere. You are a priest, which sounds important, respected, maybe even powerful. But within seconds, you realize something is very, very wrong. Because your day doesn't begin with prayer. It doesn't begin with meditation. It begins with a blade. A sharp one, waiting. And your task? Remove every single hair from your body.
Not trim, not tidy. Remove everything. Your head is first, then your face, then your arms, your legs, and yes, even your eyebrows. Gone. All of it. At first, your mind resists. This feels unnecessary, extreme, maybe even a little absurd. But then you step outside, and the world answers your question immediately. The heat is relentless. Dust moves with the wind like it has a purpose. And insects? They don't buzz politely. They land, they stay, they explore. Hair in this environment is not just hair. It's shelter, it's storage, it's an invitation. It traps sweat, it collects dirt, and worst of all, it becomes a home for parasites, tiny creatures that don't ask permission, that don't leave, that settle in and stay. So suddenly, the shaving doesn't feel ridiculous anymore. It feels necessary. You continue carefully, methodically, because this is not optional. This is daily life. Miss a day and you'll feel it. Not immediately, but soon enough. And yes, without eyebrows, your face now permanently looks like you've just heard shocking news. But honestly, that's the least of your problems. Because this isn't about appearance. It's about control. Less hair means less heat, less sweat, fewer hiding places, fewer risks. In a place where survival depends on small decisions, this is one of them. By the time you're done, your skin feels strange, exposed, vulnerable, but also lighter, cleaner. And just when you think you're finished, you're not. Because now comes the next rule, and this one never ends. You wash.
Not casually, not quickly, thoroughly, repeatedly. Once is not enough. Twice is not enough. You wash again, and again, and again. Before rituals, after rituals, before eating, after eating, after stepping outside, after doing almost anything. At first, it feels exhausting, unnecessary, almost obsessive. But then you look toward the Nile, the river that gives life to everything around you. Crops grow because of it. People survive because of it. Civilization exists because of it. And yet, it carries things you cannot see. The water looks calm, peaceful, but within it, invisible dangers, bacteria, parasites, organisms that, in this time, no one fully understands. But they don't need to understand them, because they've already seen the results. They've seen who gets sick, who survives, who doesn't. And they noticed something simple. People who stayed clean lived longer. So they turned it into law, not suggestion, not advice, a rule. Wash constantly. And suddenly it all connects, because now that your body is shaved, cleaning becomes easier, faster, more effective. There's nothing trapping dirt, nothing holding moisture, nothing hiding what shouldn't be there. Your entire routine, every uncomfortable part of it, starts to make sense. But your day isn't over, not even close, because being a priest isn't just about being clean, it's about being pure. And purity here means discipline. Your clothes, fresh, simple, clean linen, changed often. Your food, carefully chosen, prepared with rules you must follow exactly. Your behavior, controlled, measured, watched. Because you are not just a person anymore. You are a bridge between people and gods. And that means there is no room for error. You walk through temple halls carved from stone. The air smells faintly of incense. The walls are covered in symbols that tell stories older than memory. Every movement you make is intentional. Every action has meaning. You speak carefully. You move carefully. You live carefully. Because in this world, order is everything. And chaos? Chaos is dangerous. By midday, the heat becomes heavier, the kind that drains energy without asking. And still, you continue. More rituals, more washing, more rules. And somewhere in the middle of it all, you realize something. This life, as strict and uncomfortable as it is, works. It protects you. It structures your world. It gives you control in a place where nature has all the power. Because ancient Egypt wasn't gentle. It didn't adapt to people.
But there is a problem. Others understand this too. Grave robbers are not stories. They are real. Patient. Watching. Waiting. To them, a tomb is not sacred. It is opportunity. A lifetime of wealth, sealed in silence. Just waiting. So Egypt responds, the only way it knows, with design. Tombs are no longer just places of rest. They become defenses. Passageways twist, turn, mislead. Doors hide more than they reveal. Chambers sit behind chambers. Some false, some final. And you never know which is which. It is not just architecture. It is deception, built to confuse, to delay, to protect. Less a grave, more a strategy. And sometimes it works. So well that centuries pass. Silence remains untouched. Until one day, someone finds it. By accident. Or by persistence. And in that moment, they realize something unsettling. They have stepped inside a mind that planned for eternity. Is it excessive? Maybe. But when everything you are depends on what remains behind, excess becomes necessary. Because even in death, you protect what is yours. And by now, your life has changed, shaped, controlled, defined by rules. You have shaved. You have washed. You have avoided what should not be eaten, respected what must not be touched. You have learned where to stand and where not to. You have accepted what cannot be changed. So naturally, you expect something in return. Relief, ease, something softer. There is none. Because if you are not a priest, you are something else, a worker. And your world is just as strict. You lift stone, shape it, move it, build things that will outlast memory itself. And nothing on that scale is ever built by accident. There is structure, schedules, roles, everything assigned, everything measured, even your food, given carefully, so your strength does not fail, so your body continues, because a broken worker builds nothing, and Egypt intends to build. So the system keeps you going. Not gently, not kindly, efficiently. Because as long as you function, everything else continues. The work is heavy, relentless, repetitive, sometimes dangerous, but never chaotic, never uncontrolled. Every movement you make belongs to something larger, something planned, something deliberate. Because here, chaos is not inconvenience. It is destruction. One mistake and everything begins to fail. Stone shifts. Bodies collapse. Progress stops. And Egypt does not accept stillness. Not in life, not in work, not anywhere. Because to stop is to fall apart. And this world was never built to fall apart.
You arrive. You do what is expected. And in return, the system continues, steady, unbroken. And when you step back, when you finally allow yourself to see it, you understand. The pyramids, the temples, the monuments, they are not just stone. They are order made visible. And still, despite all of this, you are human. You slip, you strain, you get hurt. And in many places, that would be the moment everything begins to fall apart. But here, something different exists. There are doctors, not perfect, not modern, but real, trained, observant, careful. Some treat wounds, others illness. Some speak in ways that sound uncertain, yet beneath their words there is understanding, because they do not rely on guessing. They watch, they remember, they learn. If you are cut, they clean it. If something breaks, they bind it. If you fall ill, they give you remedies, herbs, oils, mixtures shaped by repetition, things that have worked before. And alongside this, something else remains, quiet, persistent, spoken words, spells, prayers, whispered over the body.
But they do not replace the treatment, they accompany it. The physical and the unseen, handled together, not as contradiction, but as completion. Because what cannot be explained is still acknowledged. Of course, not everything works. There are limits, mistakes. Some remedies succeed through belief as much as effect. But there is effort. They are trying, and that changes everything. Because every attempt, every observation, every adjustment builds something. Not perfect, but purposeful. And even the smallest improvement matters. Because here, survival is never guaranteed. So when you are injured, you are not left to chance. You are treated, imperfectly, sometimes strangely, occasionally uncomfortably, but meaningfully. And here, that is enough. Because if the wound closes, if the pain fades, if you stand again, you do not ask why. You simply continue. And by now, the pattern is clear. You shave, you cleanse, you choose carefully. You follow rules about food, about animals, about rulers, about knowledge, about death, about work, even about healing. And none of it is accidental, because nothing here is. Everything bends toward a single idea: Ma'at, order, balance, harmony. Simple to say, but absolute in meaning. Because without it, the world does not weaken, it unravels. The Nile rises at the wrong time, fields fail, trade breaks, power fades, and suddenly everything that felt certain disappears. That is the real danger. Not discomfort, uncertainty. So every rule, no matter how strange it first seemed, serves one purpose: to hold the world in place. Because if the system holds, life continues. And if life continues, you survive. But this means something more, something deeper. You are not just living your life.
You might, without even thinking, take a small step forward. Lift your hand. Offer a gesture. Reach out the way one human does to another. It's natural, harmless, almost automatic. But here, that instinct becomes a mistake. In ancient Egypt, you do not touch the pharaoh. Not as a greeting, not out of respect, not even by accident if you value your place in the world. Because the pharaoh is not simply a ruler. He is something more, something elevated, a living bridge between the divine and the mortal, a presence through which order itself is believed to flow. And to reach toward him is not just inappropriate, it is crossing a line that was never meant to be crossed. You may be clean, perfectly so, shaved, washed, purified beyond comfort, and still, you're human. And the divine is not meant to be touched. But beneath all of this, beneath the sacred language, there is something else, something quieter, sharper, power. Because distance here is not accidental, it is created, maintained, protected. The farther a ruler stands from human reach, the larger he becomes in the mind, untouchable, and therefore unquestionable. So this rule, it protects more than a man. It protects an idea, because the moment a king becomes familiar, becomes ordinary, something fragile begins to crack. Reverence softens, authority weakens. And in a world built on structure, that is a risk no one is willing to take. So you learn. You bow instead of reaching. You wait instead of speaking. You stand in the same space, but never in the same presence. And over time, it stops feeling strange. It becomes normal. You do not interact with the pharaoh. You move around him, orbit him, exactly as intended. Because power here is not just enforced, it is performed. Every silence, every lowered gaze, every careful step backward repeats the same quiet truth. This is not a man like you. And whether you believe it no longer matters, because you behave as if it is true. You have to. Everything depends on it. And discovering otherwise, personally, would be unwise. So your hands remain still, at your sides. You keep your distance. And very quickly, you understand something important. In Egypt, some boundaries are not symbolic. They are real.
You are not just living in this world. You are maintaining it. Every action, every choice, every quiet act of obedience, it all feeds into something larger than you, something you cannot see but are constantly holding together. And if you step outside that structure, even slightly, you are not just making a mistake, you are inviting chaos. And chaos here is not an idea, it is real. It spreads, it grows, it consumes. So you follow the rules, even the ones that feel excessive, even the ones that seem unnecessary, because they were never about you. They are about balance, a fragile, invisible balance holding everything in place. And it does not end with life. Even in death, you are judged. Your heart weighed against Ma'at, not symbolically, but as proof. Did you live in alignment? Did you maintain the order that sustained you? Which means this is not something you can ignore. Not once, not ever. Yes, it feels strict, relentless, but look closer. You live in a world shaped by forces that do not negotiate. Heat, disease, scarcity, a single river rising and falling, deciding everything. And the Egyptians understood something simple. They could not control nature, so they controlled everything else. They built a system so precise, so deeply embedded that it reduced uncertainty wherever it could. And then they lived inside it, completely. There is no separation here between belief and life. Washing is not just cleaning, it is purification. Eating is not just survival, it is alignment. Work is not just labor, it is participation in something cosmic. Every action matters because everything is connected. And when rules are woven this tightly into life, they stop feeling like rules. They become instinct, identity, truth. You do not follow the system, you are the system. And what happens if you don't? That question stays with you longer than it should. Because here, rules are not suggestions, they are enforced, carefully, deliberately. Because breaking them is not personal, it is dangerous, a threat to stability itself. So consequences exist, visible, clear, unavoidable. Small mistakes bring correction, larger ones escalate. Theft, corruption, defiance, none of it is taken lightly, because punishment is not only about justice, it is about prevention. It must be seen, so others understand, so others decide, without hesitation, I will not be next. And even here, there is order, records, testimony, structure, because chaos cannot be used to fight chaos. That would break everything. And then something changes, quietly. What once felt overwhelming begins to make sense. The shaving, the washing, the food rules, the reverence, the distance, the control, the preservation, the protection, the labor, the healing, all of it together forms something complete, something intentional. And you begin to see these rules were never meant to burden you, they were meant to protect you. Because this world is beautiful, but it is not kind. One failure of crops, of health, of coordination can spread, expand, become disaster. So Egypt does something remarkable. It prevents it. You remove hair to avoid parasites. You wash to avoid illness. You choose carefully to avoid contamination. You protect animals because they protect you. You organize labor so the impossible becomes real. You preserve the dead because identity does not end. You control knowledge to maintain order. You enforce rules to preserve stability. And above all, you believe, because belief holds it all together. Without it, the system weakens, and if the system weakens, everything falls. So you do not question it. You live it, every day, every action, every breath, because in this world, order is survival.
It turns discipline into purpose, routine into meaning, structure into something that no longer feels forced, but necessary. And that is why it works. Not for a few years, not for a few generations, for thousands of years. From the outside, it looks strange. The shaved bodies, the dark lines beneath the eyes under a burning sun, the quiet reverence for cats, the tombs designed like puzzles meant to outthink eternity itself. It is easy to see these things and call them unusual, but it is much harder to see what lies beneath. To understand that every strange rule solves a real problem, quietly, efficiently, and that is what most people miss. Because it is easy to question a system, it is much harder to build one that lasts. And then, far from the certainty of the Nile, everything changes. The ground rises, the air grows thinner, sharper, almost expectant. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, there is a place, Delphi. The Greeks believed this was the center of the world, not as a metaphor, but as truth, the place where the human and the divine came closest. And at its heart, the temple of Apollo, god of light, of truth, of prophecy. But Apollo did not speak directly. That would have been too simple. Instead, his voice passed through another, a woman, the Pythia. Not royalty, not powerful, just chosen, transformed. She sat above a crack in the earth on a sacred seat, and she breathed in what rose from below, vapors perhaps, or something less easily explained. And then something changed. Her voice shifted, her body moved differently, and her words, they did not come as answers. They came as riddles, layered, unclear, strangely compelling. And people listened. Kings climbed mountains for her voice. Armies moved because of her words. Entire futures shifted based on phrases that could mean everything or nothing, depending on who heard them. Was it divine? Or something else? Something human, wrapped in ritual, expectation, and belief? Because like Egypt, Delphi was also a system, carefully built, deeply structured, convincing. And perhaps that is the most interesting part. Not whether it was true, but that it worked. She did not always sound divine. Some said her voice was calm, almost musical, each word placed with care. Others described something very different, broken phrases, sudden cries, fragments that drifted between meaning and chaos. Not what you would expect from a voice of the gods. And yet, maybe that was the point, because perfection feels rehearsed, but unpredictability feels real. A Pythia was not alone. Around her stood the priests, watching, listening, not just to what she said, but to what could be made of it. Her words, unclear, unshaped, passed through careful minds, refined, structured, turned into something elegant. Because if confusion must be delivered, it is best delivered beautifully. So what reached the people was not just her voice, it was her voice interpreted, filtered, crafted, a collaboration between trance and translation, and somewhere in that space, a quiet question forms. Were they hearing a god, or a system so refined it could mean everything while promising nothing? And still, people came. Not casually, not out of curiosity. They came because they needed answers. Kings climbed the mountain, with armies waiting behind them. Leaders carried questions heavy enough to reshape borders, and ordinary people arrived with something quieter, but no less urgent. Fear, hope, desperation. All of them seeking clarity from a voice that never spoke plainly. Should we go to war? Should we trust? Should we risk everything? And the answers came not as decisions, but as riddles, clear enough to move you forward, but vague enough to never be wrong. There is a story, often told. A king once asked whether he should go to war. The oracle answered, "If you proceed, a great empire will fall." And that was enough. He marched forward, confident, certain, and he was right. An empire did fall, his own. And technically, the prophecy had not failed, which reveals something uncomfortable. The oracle did not need to be right, it only needed to be interpreted. And so, belief sustained it. Even when things went wrong, people did not turn away. They leaned in. They reread the words, searched for meaning hidden between the lines, because the alternative, that the gods could be wrong, was far more difficult to accept. So the system remained unbroken, perfectly designed. But belief alone does not explain power. Delphi was not only sacred, it was strategic. Access was controlled, questions were filtered, offerings opened doors, and those with influence moved more easily, closer, heard more clearly. Even divine wisdom had its hierarchy. And so the oracle became something more, not just guidance, but a tool, a way to justify decisions already made, to turn ambition into destiny, because it is easier to convince a nation when you can say, "The gods have spoken." And yet, the true brilliance of Delphi lies somewhere deeper, in uncertainty, because uncertainty protects. A clear answer can fail, but an ambiguous one survives. Each prophecy carried multiple meanings. If events moved one way, it fit. If they turned another, it still fit. And so the gods were never wrong, only misunderstood. And people accepted this, not reluctantly, but willingly. They searched, interpreted, adjusted, hearing not just what was said, but what they needed to hear. And that is when the oracle becomes something else, not just a voice, but a mirror. Because what you hear depends on who you are. The confident hear reassurance, the fearful hear warnings, the uncertain find direction. The prophecy does not give meaning, it reveals it, or perhaps it reflects it back. And in that reflection, there is a quiet truth. Perhaps the oracle never predicted the future. Perhaps it did something else. Perhaps it shaped the present by giving people just enough certainty to act, but never enough to remove responsibility. So when events unfolded, the weight did not fall on the voice of the gods. It fell on human choice. And history is filled with those choices. Men who moved armies, founded cities, destroyed kingdoms, all guided
by words that never told them exactly what to do. And often, it was not the prophecy that led to ruin, but the way it was understood. A warning mistaken for permission, a possibility mistaken for promise. And once belief took hold, action followed. Which means the prophecy did not just describe events, it helped create them. And behind it all stood the system, the priests, the rituals, the structure that shaped access, refined language, and delivered meaning, not as deception, perhaps, but as interpretation, as influence. Human hands guiding divine words, not replacing them, but shaping them. And yet, none of it would have mattered without one final element: belief. Because people arrived already convinced. They climbed the mountain. They entered sacred space. They breathed air heavy with ritual and expectation. And by the time the oracle spoke, doubt had already softened. So when the words came, strange, shifting, powerful, they were not questioned, they were felt. Because in a world full of uncertainty, even an unclear answer is better than silence. At least it gives direction. At least it gives shape to the unknown.
The fires fade. The voices disappear. The mountain remains. And what was once called the center of the world becomes something else, a memory carved into stone. There is something quietly poetic in that ending, a place devoted to understanding the future, unable to see its own. Because Delphi was not destroyed, it was outgrown, left behind by a world that no longer needed its answers. So what was it, in the end? A voice of the gods, or something else, something more human? Strip away the rituals, the incense, the sacred language, and what remains feels familiar. A place where people came searching for certainty, a voice that could mean many things at once, a system that shaped those words, and people ready to believe them. From one perspective, it looks like illusion, carefully constructed, carefully maintained, ambiguity presented as authority, uncertainty dressed as truth. But that is not the whole story, because even if the oracle did not predict the future, it changed it. It guided choices, moved actions, gave shape to uncertainty. And sometimes that is enough, because belief is not passive. It builds, it moves, it transforms. Armies march because of it. Empires rise through it. History itself bends beneath it. Delphi did not need to be perfect. It only needed to be believed. So perhaps it was neither deception nor divinity, but something in between, a meeting point of faith, of psychology, of ritual, and power. A place where people reached upward, seeking answers from the gods, and found something else, the depth of their own need to believe. Because in the end, the oracle did not give them the future, it gave them meaning. And then, far from the fading echoes of Delphi, another kind of power rises, not in riddles, but in stone. In the heart of Constantinople, where continents meet and histories collide, something immense appears, the Hagia Sophia, built under Emperor Justinian, not to replace the past, but to overshadow it, to create something so vast, so radiant, that everything before it would fade. And it worked. It rose quickly, faster than something so massive should, a space so wide it feels impossible, a dome that does not seem to rest, but to float.
Light pours in through its windows, softening stone into something almost weightless. And when you step inside, you feel it. This is not just a building, it is an idea. Gold shimmers across the walls, marble reflects the light. The air itself feels alive. Everything is designed to convince you you have stepped into something sacred, because that is the purpose. The Hagia Sophia is not just a place of worship, it is a statement, a declaration that this empire stands closer to the divine than any other. There is a story that when Justinian first saw it, he looked upward and spoke, "I have surpassed Solomon." Bold, but revealing, because this is power in stone, belief made visible, faith given form. And yet, its greatest miracle is not its beauty, it is its survival.
Across centuries, it endured. Empires rose and fell around it. It changed. A church, a mosque, a museum, and still it remained itself, not frozen in time, but moving with it. Its great dome, so improbable, so daring, collapsed, then rose again, rebuilt, strengthened, reshaped. Earthquakes tested it, time pressed against it, and still it stood, not perfect, not untouched, but enduring. A living structure, adapting without losing its soul. Beneath that dome, power was not only shown, it was performed. Emperors were crowned there, victories were declared there, faith and authority woven together until they became indistinguishable, and the building made it believable. Light fell from above like approval, voices rose and echoed into something greater. Incense drifted, blurring the line between earth and heaven, and for a moment, standing there, it was easy to believe you were witnessing something eternal. But nothing remains the center forever. Beyond those walls, the world was changing, and in the year 1453, it changed completely. Constantinople fell. An empire that had endured for over 1,000 years finally broke. Worn down, outmatched, the walls gave way, the city was taken, and the Hagia Sophia, silent witness to centuries, remained. Not destroyed, but transformed. Again. Because like all things, it reminds us no system, no matter how powerful, escapes time, but some leave something greater behind. Meaning. And then the walls gave way. What followed was not silence, it was rupture. The city opened, fear spilling into its streets, voices rising, footsteps scattering, and in that moment, people did not run away, they ran inward, toward the Hagia Sophia, toward stone, toward sanctity, toward hope. Because if anything could protect them, it would be this. Inside, the vast space filled, bodies, breath, prayer. Some say a final liturgy unfolded beneath the dome, even as the city collapsed outside. The doors closed, the world held back. For a moment, it must have felt as if time itself had stopped. But time does not stop. The doors broke, the illusion shattered, and the building that had belonged to one world now belonged to another. An empire ended in that instant, but the structure remained. And what is remarkable is that not that it was taken, it is that it was spared. Mehmed II did not destroy it, did not erase it. He chose something else. He claimed it. The Hagia Sophia became a mosque, not through destruction, but transformation. Its walls remained, its dome still hovered in impossible balance. Light still fell as it always had, but meaning shifted, layered, rewritten. Christian images were covered, not destroyed, but hidden, and in their place new symbols rose,
Arabic calligraphy flowing across the same walls, a new direction marked within the space, minarets lifting into the sky, changing the horizon without breaking the structure. It was not replaced, it was rewritten. And that is what makes it extraordinary. It did not belong to one story, it carried many.
Within its walls, empires did not erase one another. They remained, layered, accumulating. The past was not removed, it was absorbed. And if you stood inside, truly stood still, you could feel it. Echoes of chants beneath new prayers. One faith resting quietly beneath another, separated by centuries, yet never completely gone. A building made of memory. Under Ottoman rule, it rose again, not as a relic, but as a center. Sultans prayed beneath its dome. Ceremonies returned. Power gathered once more in its shadow. And year after year, it was cared for, strengthened, protected, not as something old, but as something alive. Minarets rose beside it. Calligraphy crowned it. Carpets softened the ground beneath. And still, beneath layers of plaster, older images remained, hidden but not forgotten. And so, the debate continues. Because the Hagia Sophia is no longer just architecture. It is memory. It is identity. It is history, still unfolding. And perhaps that is its greatest legacy. Not that it stayed the same, but that it never stopped changing. A structure that did not resist time, but absorbed it. A place where empires rose, faiths shifted, meanings transformed, and yet something remained. Not fixed, not singular, but enduring. And so, once more, Hagia Sophia becomes something else, not just stone, but a question, a reflection of the present, where past and future press against each other, where faith meets modernity, where identity refuses to settle. Inside, mosaics are veiled during prayer, then revealed again when silence returns. Nothing is lost. Nothing is fully visible. The building breathes in layers, hidden, revealed, hidden again, as it always has. Because Hagia Sophia has never been still. It has never belonged to one moment, one meaning, one voice. Every era has touched it, not by erasing, but by adding, reshaping, reinterpreting, leaving traces that refuse to disappear. And so it remains what it has always been, a living monument, not frozen in history, but moving with it. Empires rose beneath its dome, convinced they would last forever. They are gone. Rulers stood in its light, certain of their power. Now they are only names. Beliefs filled its space, shifted, clashed, overlapped, and still the structure remains. The same dome, once above emperors, now watches over strangers. The same walls that carried ancient chants now echo with new voices, different prayers, different languages, but the same air, the same light, the same quiet feeling that this place exists slightly beyond time. And that is what makes it unsettling. Because Hagia Sophia does not belong to the past, it belongs to all of it. Step inside and you feel it. Centuries layered upon centuries, gold, stone, silence, sound, memory pressed into every surface, mosaics watching from one age, calligraphy speaking from another,
footsteps overlapping, emperors, sultans, priests, ordinary lives, not separate histories, one continuous presence. And perhaps that is its greatest truth, not what it is, but what it has been, a church, a mosque, a museum, all of them fully, without ever losing itself. Because most buildings belong to one identity, and when that identity fades, they fade with it. They become ruins, fragments, forgotten. But not this one. This one changed, adapted, endured. It carried its past forward instead of leaving it behind. And in doing so, it became something rare, not a monument to one world, but a vessel for many. So when you look at it now, you are not just seeing architecture, you are seeing time. 15 centuries of belief, of ambition, of conflict, of devotion, all held within one space. A structure that outlived the empires that built it, and will likely outlast those who study it. Still standing, still watching, still becoming.